Hey, we do this every time we have a baptism here at this church. So once more, can we celebrate what we witnessed here this morning? Man, that is awesome. Alyssa, for you to make that decision is the coolest thing for us to be able to celebrate today. We will never, ever get tired of that because today, as a church, we witnessed a young lady make the life-changing decision to simply say, I choose Jesus. And she has found her victory in him, and that is what it is all about. And so just in the same way, certainly that heaven rejoices today, we do the same for Alyssa, for your whole family, and for the hope of salvation that is available to all of us, to every single one of us through Jesus Christ. I cannot think of a better way for us to get going here today. That's awesome. Hey, today, as it always is, it is great to be with you today, to worship with you, to come together here, and whether you had a really good week or maybe it was a tough week, and I don't say that lightly or dismissively, even in the slightest. However your week has been, I am so thankful that you chose to join us for worship, and I want you to know that we are so glad that you're with us here at Kenwood Heights this morning. Hey, we had a blast on Friday night here this past week at our church outing at the Louisville Bats game. This past Friday night, a group of just shy of 40 of us, I believe there was about 38 of us in total, just shy of 40 of us, we met down at Slugger Field for a great night to watch a baseball game and just hang out together. In fact, there's a group picture for us there. It's a little bit, I know, a little pixeled there, but kind of get an idea of the size of our group that was there, and we had a lot of fun. The game was delayed a little bit with the rain that we had there randomly on Friday, so our start time was pushed back a little bit, but it was kind of funny because we kind of, we kind of took over like a corridor of a spot there. We came like a Kenwood Heights corridor there. We all just met in there and ate food and, hung out together for a little while for the most part. But after the game got going, as you can see, we took over a handful of rows in the right field baseline area, and we had a lot of fun. There was good food, there was a lot of laughs, and we just enjoyed the time together because, in all seriousness, the truth is, on Friday night, you hear me say this all the time because it's so true, on Friday night, we were able to activate that shared life together value that we prioritize so much here. We believe in that the church is meant to do life together, to share life together, to be in unison together, and to have fun together in that way. And so I'm so glad we got to do that here on Friday night. But with that, I also got to share something else with you too, because to end the night, something else pretty cool happened, okay? And I think this needs to be acknowledged and highlighted. It's pretty cool as well, because in the bottom of the ninth inning, if you know baseball or not, let me explain it to you this way. In the bottom of the ninth inning, the game was tied, and the Bats hit a walk-off home run to win the game. That's always kind of a cool thing, right? You get to sit there and watch as they win the game. But something else also really cool happened and made that more special, and the reason why I'm even telling you about this walk-off home run is due to this picture. And that is because of Kenwood Heights' own Michaela Locke is the one who caught the home run ball. So that is pretty cool. She sent me the video of it too. There's video of that, which is awesome, watching Michaela run crazy to go get the ball. She pushed people up. No, she didn't. I'm kidding. But that is really cool. In fact, as Sharon can attest, I was walking back in to go get something real quick, and they stopped me and they said, Michaela got the ball. And I went, you're kidding me? That's awesome. And so that's kind of a cool memory that we have, certainly for her, but also a way to kind of celebrate that night together. So hey, again, if you're able to join us on Friday, I'm glad that you did. If you could not be there with us on Friday, I hope that you'll be able to join us at our next church-wide outing like that. Next time we come together and do stuff, whether that is, as I mentioned this morning, our Master Revisions packing party, our church retreat, whatever it might be, and we want to invite you to come and join us when we do stuff like that together. You will not regret that. Hey, this morning we are going to be jumping in to a new series of messages that we're going to be in over these next couple of weeks. You see it on your bulletin there. It's a series that we are calling Refresh. And as you see listed on your bulletin, over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be examining together ways in which the Bible teaches us how we can slow down. Ways in which the Bible teaches us how we can slow down, how we can refocus our minds, and how we can refresh our hearts. And I think in some way, shape, or form, we all need that reminder sometimes, don't we? Sometimes we all need to be able to kind of stop for a moment and to take a breath, if you will, and to just kind of gather ourselves to be able to figure out what to do next. I know, speaking for myself, I certainly do, and my guess is that you do too. In a fast-moving, ever-changing, always on-the-go type of world, and it's not just for certain age groups or demographics. All people of all kinds are always moving, or always going, or always doing something, and I think the reality is we'd all do well sometimes to simply just stop, to slow down for a moment. In a world that seeks to always grab our attention, that is constantly looking to pull us in one direction or another, trying to see it to shift our focus, to tell us, go look over here, do this instead, seeking to cause distractions for us, I think we'd all do well sometimes to simply just refocus, to kind of gather ourselves and to refocus our minds. In a world that is full of overwhelming anxiety that consumes us, in a world that is full of what seems to be unending weariness that can overload us and what can just be heavy worry that burdens us, I think we'd all do well sometimes to simply just refresh our hearts. Stop for a moment, take a breath, refocus, and refresh. Now, let's be clear about this as we talk about this idea of refresh, as we're getting into this here today. We aren't talking about the kind of refresh, if you will, that seeks to merely just finish the day and then wake up the next day and do it all over again, the same routines over and over again. Okay, that's not what we're talking about here, right? You know what I'm talking about when I say, you ever done that? Maybe you can relate to this for yourself personally or for your families. You ever just had that thought of like, you know what, let's just get the day over with and we'll start all over again tomorrow? You ever said that before? I'll be the first person to raise my hand and say I am guilty of that far more than I like to admit. Too often in my life, and I'm speaking for me, but maybe you can relate to this. Too often in my life, I have that mentality of going, let's just get through the day. We'll start up again the next day. You know, it's been a long day. We're tired. We're worn down. We're stressed out. We're just done. We feel like we feel like we've done all we can do. We've parented as much as we can parent. We've peopled as much as we can people. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, we find ourselves almost kind of clock watching, if you will, just kind of counting down the hours until we can say, all right, let's go to bed. Let's call it a day. And then we say to ourselves, okay, I'm going to get some rest. I'm going to wake up. I'm going to start all over again tomorrow. But if we're honest about it, what happens? More often than not, we wake up the next day with that same weariness, that same stress, that same stale mindset. And the question is what really changed for us? And I think if we're being honest about it, the answer is that basically nothing. Nothing changed for us. Like I said, we can look at this from like a work mindset too. Maybe in our workplaces or in our careers, or even for some of you can look at this from a school, an academic standpoint if you'd like as well, where we do the same routines day in and day out. And when our work or our school seems to cause us stress all the time, we find more stress than we find fulfillment. We find more frustration than we find joy. There's more questions than there are answers. And that day-to-day grind, if you will, that is work in our lives, we find ourselves beginning to question, is this even worth it anymore? I'm investing all of this time, all this effort, all this energy. Is it even worth it anymore? And so here too, we begin to kind of watch the clock, if you will. We're waiting for the day to be over, the school day to be over, the work day to be over. We're counting down until the weekend comes. We're counting down to that next day off. We're counting down to where our responsibilities can technically be finished so that we can go home and look to start over again the next day. But here too, let's be honest about it. What happens more often than not? We wake up the next day and it's the same routine over and over again. That same stress, that same stale questioning of things. Maybe I can take this one step further, and maybe it's been in your personal life where you found this need for a refresh. Maybe it's been in your work or your career life you found this need for a refresh. Maybe it's been in your spiritual life that you found a need for a refresh. Maybe even spiritually you have found yourself approaching this part of your life with that thought of, let's just get this over with and start over again later. Maybe when you first encountered God in your life, maybe you were all in on your faith. Maybe whenever that was for you, much like what we witnessed today with Alyssa, maybe when that happened for you, maybe you were all in. God, I am fully invested in this. God, I want everything to do with you. You were invested in God's kingdom. You were invested in the church. You were fully committed, ready to surrender your wants and your desires. You wanted to be obedient to God in all ways for yourself, for your family, for everyone around you, and your spiritual walk with the Lord was on fire, ready to go. But now, it's kind of become routine. Now it's kind of become just stale. Now it's kind of just become habit. You know, you come to church on Sundays still, but it just doesn't do it for you like it used to. Or maybe you still desire to live as God has called you to live and be who God has called you to be, but you're just not seeing the fruit of that commitment in your life anymore like you thought you would be. Maybe, and nobody really wants to confess this. I get it. I wouldn't either, right? Nobody wants to confess this, but maybe we look at our spiritual walk with the Lord and we go, I thought there'd be more. I thought I'd see something different than this. And maybe, even though it's very difficult to admit, maybe you found yourself beginning to question God as much as you worship him. Even in your spiritual life, maybe you find yourself, as we have said, clock watching. You know, you sit down and you go, okay, God, I'm gonna read the Bible here, and you sit down and you get your Bible, you get your app, whatever it might be that you're utilizing, and you sit down and you start reading, but then you realize, I'm just trying to read and get through these verses as quick as I can. Maybe you come to church, whether it's on a Sunday morning worship or a Wednesday night Bible study or whatever it might be, and you come and you say, okay, God, I'm going to try and do this, but you're just kind of hoping for it to be over with as soon as it can be over. Maybe you've been trying to do your absolute best. Maybe you're trying to do your absolute best to say, I want to live a God-honoring Christian life in all ways, but at the same time, you have found yourself sometimes wondering when we can kind of clock out of the Christian life a little bit. Maybe you've said, and again, nobody wants to admit this, I understand that, but maybe you've said sometime in your life, God, when can I have some fun? When do I get to say what I really want to say? When can I do what I really want to do? When can I be something different? When can I kind of clock out? When can I take off this spiritual robe, if you will, the spiritual hat, if you will, and when can I be somebody that I really kind of want to be sometimes? But you see, what happens is we still have that same apathy. We go back and we go to bed and we come back the next day and it's the same apathy, that same distance, that same staleness, if you will. See, friends, if any of these scenarios that I just described fits you, first off, let me say this, welcome to the team, right? I think we all fit one of those categories in some way, shape, or form, so welcome to the team. But second of all, let me remind all of us of this, that because of Jesus, there's a better way for us to live. I want you to hear that, I want you to know that because of Jesus, there is a better way for you and I, there is a better way for us to live, there's a better way for us to move forward, to press on with a renewal of purpose, with a refocus of mindset, and with a refresh of our hearts. And it's all because of Jesus. And so in this refresh series of messages, my hope for us over these next couple weeks is that we will begin to know even more personally in our lives that through Jesus, we can arise each day to a new way of living. That through knowing Jesus, we can arise each day to a new mindset and a refreshed heart. No longer do you and I together have to just go through the motions. No longer do we have to say, well, hopefully tomorrow's any better. Hopefully I'll just try and get some rest and maybe it'll change then. But instead, through Jesus, we can make that change ourselves. That we can be refreshed in him, that we can know him. And I believe wholeheartedly that the way to this new way of living, this way to this new daily mindset, this refreshed heart that we're talking about, I believe wholeheartedly that Scripture teaches us that this is possible for us simply through being with God. Be with him. Go to him. Enjoy him. Because in him we are given a reminder of purpose, a renewal of heart, and a refresh for ourselves mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. In fact, if I could give you the entire crux of what this series is going to be about, kind of like the main bottom line, if you will, of what we're going to focus on and push towards each week as we talk about this, the key reminder that I would love for us all to hang on to is very simply just this: spend time with God. Spend time with God in your life. That's it. That's the focus. That's the key. You know, I've told you before that as a preacher, I always want to try and keep things very simple. I always want to try and keep things very simple and directly focused, and that applies here. That this idea of a refresh, I'm not trying to say, here, practice these, 8 steps to find this refreshment in your life. I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to simply tell you, go read this and go do that and everything will be changed in your life. No. I'm saying that in your life and in mine, may we intentionally, purposely spend time with God. And I believe wholeheartedly that he will do that through us. That in him we find new purpose. In him we find what we need through slowing down, through refocusing, and through being with him. Acts chapter 3, one of Jesus' disciples, a man named Peter, is preaching in the temple when he says this. He says, now repent of your sins and turn to God so that your sins may be wiped away. And then look what he says. He says, then times of refreshment will come from the presence of the Lord, and he will again send you Jesus, your appointed Messiah. I love that reminder in verse 20 that times of refreshment will come from the presence of the Lord. So as we go through this together, as we continue to get into this way, I challenge all of us to keep this simple question at the forefront of our minds, and it's a question that only you and I can answer for ourselves. A simple question for us to remember at all times, and it's this: how am I spending personal time with God in my life? How am I spending personal time with God in my life? If the only thing that we are utilizing to supplement and grow and develop and cultivate our faith is our Sunday morning worship gatherings, friends, we're missing so much more. If we are thinking to ourselves, you know what, God understands, He knows my schedule, He knows what I've got on my plate right now, He knows that I really can't get to it, then we are missing out on what all God can and will do for us. How am I spending personal time with God in my life? When we look at our lives, when we look at our choices, we look at our routines, we look at our plans, we look at our day in and our day out, ask ourselves that question. That's our focus within this series, to spend time with Him. For the remainder of our time this morning, I want to begin unpacking this refresh focus, and I want to do that by looking at one of the ways in which Scripture teaches us that we can find a refresh by spending time with God, and that is by finding peace through our stillness. That we can find peace through our stillness. And man, let's do this together. By show of hands, who would say today that in your life, man, I could really use more peace in my life? Anybody say that? Absolutely. I think about every single person would say that, wouldn't we? Because we all desire that, right? You know, peace is that calmness in life's storms. When everything else is swirling around us, when everything else seems like it's moving over and over and will not stop, peace is what kind of keeps us centered. Peace is that endurance in life's battles. It's that ability to go, this is so difficult right now, this is so overwhelming right now, but I can move forward because my trust is in the Lord. Peace is that stability in the face of all things. But you see, the problem is that especially in our world right now, there are so many things that rob us of peace, aren't there? There are so many things in our world right now that rob us of peace. In other words, we could put it like this: there are a lot of peace robbers in life. Would you agree with that? There are a lot of peace robbers in our life, and they can come in all kinds of different forms for us. In fact, we'll look at it this way, okay? We'll kind of unpack a few of these together. For example, for many of us, one peace robber that we might all deal with in some way, shape, or form is this: accessibility. A peace robber for us might be this idea of accessibility, the fact that we are always accessible, that we are always reachable. And maybe not everyone struggles with this, but maybe for you, maybe one of the things that robs you of your peace is that you can never fully get away. You can never get away with God. And in full transparency, I know that I am far more guilty of this than I'd care to admit. I shared with you a few weeks ago about how my family recently took a little getaway weekend vacation just back in August here just last month. And as most of you know, I have 3 kids, ages 9, 6, and 3. We spaced them out perfectly, did that really well. And as most kids do typically at this age, my kids love swimming pools and water rides, right? And I shared that with you a few weeks ago. That's what we did. So we went to an indoor water park, and we based our little vacation around finding a place where our kids could be in the water as much as possible. But not only that, with it being our family vacation, I knew I wanted to be in there with them, right? I knew that I wanted to be with them as much as I possibly could. I wanted to ride the water slides. I regret that now. I wanted to ride the water slides. I wanted to swim in the pools. I wanted to experience all of that right alongside of them. But I have to confess something to you. And I don't say this out of pride. I say this out of frustration with myself more than anything. And what I have to confess is that I wasn't at peace when we first got there. It was my own fault. I wasn't at peace when we first got there, and it was my own fault, because as we arrived and as we checked into our hotel for that weekend, we went up to our room and we dropped our things off, and we all got ready to head to the water park and to the pool. And as we were getting ready to leave the room, at an instinct, I reached for my what? Anybody know? Want to guess? What did I reach for? My phone, exactly. Immediately, the first thing I did is I reached for my phone. And thankfully, I thought about it for a second, and I realized, okay, I really don't need this with me. I'm here, and I'm going to a water park. No big deal. I don't need a phone down there with me. So I left it there. But that's not the part that I'm frustrated by. The part that I'm frustrated by is for the first part of that evening, not the whole evening, but for definitely the first part of that evening, that we were there on a family vacation, making memories together as a family with our kids. I openly admit to you that there were thoughts in my head of, what if somebody tries to call me? What if I miss something? What if someone tries to reach me? What if there's a problem at church? What if there's a need, something going on back in Louisville and I don't have? What if I'm not reachable? What if? And in full transparency with you, I don't say this again pridefully at all. I say this more out of shame that the concept of reachability robbed me of peace in that moment. It took away something that was important for me, and maybe you've seen that in your own life too. Maybe that idol, if you will, of accessibility, maybe that idol has caused you to be distracted, to always be wondering, to maybe even miss out on something special in your life because you were focused on the wrong things. Again, I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal here. I know I do this more than I care to admit to, but it frustrates me, and I'm sure you've seen this. It frustrates me when I go out to a restaurant, whether it's a staff meeting or a lunch I have here with somebody here in our church or even just my own family. It's so frustrating for me to go sit in a restaurant and I see a couple sitting across from each other at a booth, and they're on their phones. And the one that gets me even more, and I see this far too often in today's world, the one that gets me even more is when I go and I see a family sitting there, or a parent or grandparent sitting with their kids, and as the kids are sitting there, just kind of sitting there with the food, sitting there with the toy, there's grandparent or parent sitting there on their phone. Why? We miss out on so many things because this idea of going, we always have to be reachable, we always have to be accessible, it robs us of our peace, and it takes away something that God might have for us. But friends, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. And maybe it's making a change to be present in the moment. Maybe it's making that commitment to say, you know what, I'm gonna put this down. I'm gonna turn on the do not disturb. I'm going to make sure that I am focused right where I need to be, who I need to be with. And maybe in those moments, that wondering of what am I missing, or that distance that might be there, maybe that'll go away and some peace can come back into our lives. There's a lot of peace robbers out there, but accessibility is certainly one of them. There's a second peace robber, and it's this, number 2, people. By show of hands, who would say that there has been a person who has robbed you of peace in your life? Absolutely. True story this morning. This isn't in my notes. This happened this morning. I was driving the kids to church. Noah and Leela come with me every Sunday morning because they come to Sunday school, so we're on the way here this morning. I live about 20 minutes away from here. I take the Gene Snyder to get here. And as I'm on the Gene Snyder freeway, I have no idea why this happened. I'm being 100% honest with you. I didn't do anything, okay? Let me be clear on that. I am in the left lane, and I happen to look out my window, and there's somebody next to me that was saying hi to me, but not in the right way, if you know what I mean. True story. And there was that part of me where I kind of did a double take. It's like, is that Peyton? No, I'm kidding. But I did a double take, and I thought to myself, like, why? What did I do? And for that brief second, there was that little part of me that was so hyper-focused on why this person was doing this to me. It robbed me of peace in that moment. Here I was, riding with my kids on the way to church, getting ready to be here with you, my church family, and yet for just a minute there, somebody else took that away from me. I don't know why. Maybe for you, as we said, maybe people rob you of peace. More than we'd care to admit, maybe there is someone who takes stuff away from us, who says, you know what, they take away what is so special to us. And maybe more and more you have found yourself, whether it's been routinely in life or here recently, maybe more and more you have found yourself saying things like, I can't believe they did this. God, you won't believe what so-and-so said to me. Or you know what, I won't be a part of it if you know who is there. There's no way I'm going to go. And you see, whether that's socially, mentally, emotionally, or yes, even spiritually, without it tending for it to happen, maybe we have allowed a person or persons to rob us of peace in our lives. Suddenly we have gotten so fixated on what someone else is doing that, listen to me, we are missing out on what God is doing. Suddenly we've become so fixated on what someone has said or someone is doing to us that we are missing out on so much more that God has available to us. But you see, let me say that to you again, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. Because in talking about peace, in talking about what it means to make a change, to no longer allow people to dictate our emotions, our actions, our decisions, we know that we can go to God and He will refresh us. Through spending time with Him, through knowing Him, and through allowing His love to transform us, renew us, restore us, refresh us. People can rob us of our peace, but God can refresh us. But along with that, as we look at our world today, there is one final peace robber that I want us to look at today, and it's where we're gonna plan ourselves these last couple minutes here. And the problem is that this last thing we're gonna talk about, this can routinely rob us of our peace. It can create this idea of staleness and even callousness in our lives, if you will. And in reality, this can cause us to miss so many important things in our life, because this final peace robber we're gonna talk about is simply this: busyness. Busyness. It's a peace robber for all of us. In today's world, it has become common practice for us to wear busyness as a badge of honor in a way. It has become common practice for us to say, look how busy I am, look what's on my plate, and we say that with some sort of pride sometimes, and I don't quite know why. We work long hours, we devote our time to always getting our checklist or our to-do list done, and we find ourselves constantly on the move. And to be clear when I say this, I want to make sure we're all clear on this. Hard work and meeting needs and providing resources, those are not bad things for us, okay? I'm not suggesting that. I'm not saying that. Hard work, meeting needs, providing resources, all that's not bad things for us. I'm not making that suggestion, but my point is instead to say this, that if we are not careful, we can become so consumed with this idol of busyness that we will completely lose sight of the value of stillness. We become so consumed with this idol of going, I got to be moving, I got to be going, I got to be doing, that we lose sight of what it means to be still, to be with God. Busyness can eliminate our peace. Due to our busyness, we can miss out on moments to invest in our friendships and in our families. I get it. Sometimes things come up and we can't change our plans, but think back for yourself. I know I can say this. Think back for yourself. Have you ever had a chance to maybe go do something with your family or your friends or something, and you had to go, oh, I'm sorry, no, I got something else to do instead that you could have pushed off till later? Busyness causes us sometimes to miss out on moments to invest in our friendships and our families. Due to our busyness, we can overlook opportunities to create new connections with those around us, or even to develop something new within ourselves. Sometimes we become so hyper-focused on going, I got to get this done, that done, and we're looking at ourselves over and over again. We're not looking to what God has for us. We're not looking at what's around us. And sometimes, due to our busyness, we can completely overlook the things that we should be concerned about in our lives. And even so much as the thought of stopping seems so incredibly hard sometimes, doesn't it? No matter the context, even the thought sometimes of simply just stopping sounds so incredibly hard sometimes. I'm fortunate. I've got a lot of great friends in ministry. I've been in ministry a long time, certainly working in youth ministry with my main background, but of course I've been the lead minister here of this church now since April, and I've had a lot of great people invest in me within our church, but also friends of mine outside of our church setting as well. And not long after I stepped into my position here as our lead minister, a good friend, a guy that I've been connected with for a while and have conversations with, but a friend of mine who's a pastor at a church over in Indiana, a really big church, really great, healthy church, doing great things. He called me and he said, hey, do you want to grab lunch sometime? I said, sure, that'd be great. So we sat down together and we just started talking, and he started asking me questions, kind of like a mentorship connection. He started asking me questions and investing in me, pouring into me. I so appreciated that. But one of the things that certainly just kind of caught my attention as I was asking him questions about his church, and he goes, well, we do Thursday night services. And I said, you do Thursday nights? And he said, yeah. And I said, how in the world do you get a sermon done ready to go for a Thursday night? And he said, man, I got to be able to sit down and commit myself, devote myself. I got to make sure that I am blocking out all the other things, and I have to be able to stop and focus on God in that moment. And I remember thinking about sitting across from him at that booth going, I don't know if I can do that, man. Like, there's things to be done. There's things to do. There's things to take care of, whether it's at church and life and our families, whatever it might be. But I was so encouraged by his words. I was so challenged by his words because he's right. It's so difficult sometimes that sometimes we just need to stop and go to God. Maybe you hear me say that and you go again, yeah, Alex, I hear that, but you don't know what's all on my plate. I'm not working a 9 to 5. I'm working a morning to evening, wake up to go to sleep kind of schedule. Every day I wake up and I got to be able to get my kids ready, get myself ready. I got to be able to get the kids to school. I got to be able to get myself to work. I got to be able to work through the day. And my job is very difficult. I'm overwhelmed with my schedule right now. After work, I got to find ways to either get my kids picked up from school or get them to where they need to be. I got to get back home. I got to get kids to sports games or after school programs. I got to get dinner fed. I got to get things taken care of. You don't know. There is no way for me to stop right now with all that's on my plate. You're right, I don't. I don't know your schedule. You might say, yeah, Alex, that's easy to say, but you know what? Things got to get done. Bills got to be paid. Stuff has to happen, and I'm the one who makes it happen. And I agree. Like I said, there are things in life that need to get done, absolutely. But you see, in the midst of this focus of what it means to refresh our peace, I would also argue this, that sometimes, please hear me on this, sometimes the hardest thing to do is actually the most important thing to do. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is actually the most important thing to do. And maybe in your life, God did not create you and I to always be moving and to neglect Him. It's not what God created us for. And maybe there is that time that you need to stop and to focus on Him and to be still. Luke chapter 10. Jesus and His disciples are traveling on their way to Jerusalem. And I love this story. We have preached this story before. It's a great story. Luke chapter 10, beginning in verse 38, we read this. As Jesus and the disciples continued on the way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed Him into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet listening to what He taught. But Martha was, and notice this word here, remember this, Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. But the Lord said to her, my dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. So as Jesus arrives at this home, and as He does, we see two different responses to His being there. Because Mary, as we see, Mary sits at His feet and she listens to Him. But Martha, remember that key word that we honed in on there just in a second ago? While Jesus was there, Martha was distracted. She was preparing the big dinner and she is busy. Now, again, humanly speaking, I think we can all get where Martha is coming from, can't we? Even as we talk about Wednesday nights, my friend Tom Peck's going to lead the Quest 52 class, and Larry Wood and I are going to be able to lead the book called Undistracted. We're going to talk about this idea of distraction and what it means to pull our focus away from what God has called us for. And in this case here, we see that. We see what Martha is doing. Because just in the same way that we prepare our homes when a guest may be arriving soon, Martha is paying extra caution and care because Jesus is coming to her home. But it's notable that as Jesus arrives, where Martha immediately resorts to busyness, to go doing stuff, to got to get stuff taken care of, Mary resorts to stillness. Mary stops. Now again, humanly speaking, understandably, Martha's a little bit annoyed. That's the Alex translation when I say that, but I imagine that's what we're seeing here, right? Martha's a little bit annoyed that Mary's not helping her. Verse 40 once more, look what happens. Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. It's as if Martha is saying, come on, Jesus. Look what I'm doing. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm doing it for you. You're in my home. I'm trying to give you a great welcoming. I'm trying to provide for you. I'm doing all this stuff, and my sister isn't doing anything. That's not fair, right? Look how busy I am. She's not being busy with me. Come on, Jesus, help me out a little bit. But verse 41, verse 42, look again at Jesus' response. The Lord said to her, my dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. Look what He says. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. You are worried and upset over all these details. There's only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. Now, again, I want to clear something up, because sometimes there can be, in my opinion, a misconception that sometimes take when they read this passage. People can take this when they read this passage. I want to be clear about this. I don't at all believe that in this passage, and I'm not teaching that in this passage, that Jesus is condemning Martha for working. Jesus is not condemning Martha for working. The text can be misconstrued and twisted to say something that's not there. The text never says that Jesus, came down on Martha and yelled at her. The text never says that Jesus expressed frustration towards Martha. But instead, what Jesus does is Jesus reminds Martha that she's worried about the wrong things. He reminds her that she is worried over the wrong things, that her attention is in the wrong spot. that her focus isn't where it needs to be, that her priorities aren't exactly in order, and then instead that it's Mary who has discovered what is worth being concerned about, and it will not be taken away from her. Her focus is in the wrong spot, and that it's Mary who has discovered what is the right thing to be concerned about and will not be taken away from her. You see, friends, from this passage this morning, especially in this light of talking about what it means to be refreshed by God, to find peace through our stillness, I think we'd all do well to remember simply this, that stillness with God is significant to the life of a Christian. Stillness with God is significant to the life of a Christian. If you do not have a personal quiet time with the Lord, can I ask you this? Why not? If you are not committing yourself to spend time with God every single day, I'm not coming down on you. I'm not condemning you. Not at all. Trust me. I'm simply trying to encourage you to say, develop that discipline in your life. We'll help you. Ask people to help you. Ask your brothers and sisters in Christ. Ask one of us, fill out a connect card and say, I just need some help starting a time with God in my life. Stillness with God is significant to the life of a Christian in all ways. Because while it's certainly easy for us to keep moving, keep going, keep being busy, it's even more important for us to be refreshed, to find peace, and to simply be still. Mary sat with Jesus. Mary stopped and she sat with Jesus, sat at his feet. She knew there were things to be done. She knew there were things that she could be doing. She knew that her sister was working and staying busy. Absolutely. She saw all that. She heard all that. But she prioritized Jesus. And here's the thing, again, what Martha was doing, she wasn't really doing anything sinful, anything like that. She wasn't. But the problem was that she lost sight of what was most important. She lost sight of what was most important, that Jesus, the Son of Man, the Messiah, is sitting in her living room, and yet other things got her attention. Jesus, the Son of Man, the Messiah, is sitting in her living room, and yet other things got her attention first. One biblical commentator put it like this. He said that there are few things that are as damaging to the Christian life as trying to work for Christ without taking time to commune with Christ. There are few things that are as damaging to the Christian life as trying to work for Christ without taking time to commune with Christ. That's really well said. And just as it was true for Martha, so it is true for us that, friends, when it comes to our lives, when we face our routines, when we go about our day, even when we go up against the peace robbers of life, in all things we can and we should prioritize stillness. Spending time with God, being with Him, and simply just enjoying His presence. I'll close with this. The beautiful words in Psalm 46, verse 10. Powerful words that resonate so heavily in the hearts of all of us, especially when we have a busy life. Psalm 46, verse 10, it says this, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be honored by every nation. I'll be honored throughout the world." Be still. Friends, let's choose stillness in our lives and find peace. Let's prioritize what it means to know Jesus and spend time with God. And let's be with God in all ways and enjoy Him. Because times of refreshment come from the presence of the Lord.